Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc. Nick Simone is busy working on his dissertation, but in his place, I am fortunate to be joined by Alex Andrade, an incredible educator and colleague of mine for many years. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Do you have trouble focusing on your to-do list, Alex?
I do, actually.
Do
I do.
you have thoughts racing through your mind when you
Uh,
try to fall asleep?
yes, I do. I can solve the world's problems at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wonderful. Well, at least one of us can. Have the usual stress management techniques stopped working for you? If not, if they have, then you have all the signs of busy brain. And luckily for you and for me and for our listeners, our special guest, Dr. Romie is here with a cure for your busy brain called brainSHIFT. Dr. Romie is a board certified physician, award-winning wellness speaker, and the founder of the brainSHIFT Institute. She brings together over 20 years of authority in neurology, integrative medicine, and mindfulness to not just deliver programs, but create cultural change. She mixes her unique authority in neurology, integrative medicine, and mindfulness to transform cultures and teams. Dr. Romie currently serves as Chief Wellness Officer at Evolution Hospitality, where she has scaled a mindfulness and wellness program for over 7,000 employees. Her expertise is featured in the national media such as NPR, NBC, TED Talks, and Forbes. Let's get ready to brain shift with Dr. Romie. Dr. Romie, welcome to State of Ed Podcast.
So excited to be here with you and all of our educator listeners. Alex, Mark, thank you so much for having me today. And we discussed prior to the program a little bit of hello and noise and shaking in the background from my 15-year-old dog as well.
Let's get started by talking about education. Now, you obviously are a very successful physician. You've created a wonderful program that is helping people change personal habits and organizational cultures. But before we go deep into busy brain and brain shift, what role did education play in your home?
Mark, Alex, thank you for asking that. One of our family values always has been continuous pursuit of knowledge and education. I am the proud daughter of immigrants here to the United States. My dad and mom immigrated here from South Asia in the late 1960s. And it was a time where immigrants of color were just starting to be allowed into the country with the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. So really when I was born, and I'm the first of three children and a daughter, my dad knew that this was the place to be, the American dream of giving a daughter an opportunity that you couldn't get anywhere else in the world. However, the education system had a slight hiccup in it. I got that awful label, ESL. And I thought that was just something from the 1970s and 80s. But lo and behold, it is a curse to millions of children across the United States today. And to which my dad said, English is a second language? No. Are you out of your mind? It is technically her third language. I have one daughter and she will become a doctor. And so I think there was one thing that I had going for me that I forever am thankful to my mother and father. And honestly, an entire community of elders, of aunties and uncles, that all of our children, it was like raising a village and advocating for all of the children of my age group in schools. And really, I would not have gotten through without that. So we started with that and really had to fight some of the stereotypes back then. I qualified by IQ test in my grades to get into gifted programs in middle school and high school. But because I had the ESL label, they were hesitant, right? So it took a lot of advocacy work. But I start by saying this today is that every step of my education, I'll tell you, it is 2022. If you were to look back and ask me in 1980, Romie, who won the Super Bowl or who won a Grammy Award, I couldn't remember any of that, but I will tell you who my third, fifth grade teachers are. I can still tell you the teachers that made impact in elementary, middle school, and high school. I would not be a doctor, a leader, and a founder, and a powerful public speaker and communicator without all of my K through 12 teachers. And so I'm on a mission, really, truly, is as we work with largely corporate America to help stress and burnout, how do I give back to the entire education community? And it was important for me to be here. We've actually, closed time for interviews as I'm finishing up the manuscript for my book. You talked about your colleague doing a dissertation. I was like, wait, somebody from education called? We have to do this. Anything I can do.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, it hurts me, especially now what the entire education sector has gone through. I don't need to tell your listeners, but for anybody that may be listening in my community as we share this podcast out, when we look at the organizational wellness and psychology data globally and here in North America, I thought doctors and nurses and healthcare workers would have been the most burnt out going through the pandemic. It's actually education. And we are bleeding teachers and administrators. And if I can do even one small thing to help, it would be an honor to serve. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Just speaking to what you were saying, you're right. I mean, during the pandemic, we were giving a monumental task. So to say that we were overwhelmed and stressed is an understatement. What are the signs of busy brain? Because just the title alone, I'm like, me, I have it 100%. What are the symptoms? What are the signs?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. It's really important as an adult because prior to the pandemic, I just want you to know I had a history with education. This just didn't start because of the pandemic. I had worked with over 50 school districts in the state of in New York, particularly Long Island, but throughout the state of New York, introducing mindfulness to teachers and to their students, and in Massachusetts and here in Florida as well. And back then, when I would meet teachers and administrators, it felt like everybody was wearing stress as a badge of honor in education,
Mm.
right? I'm stressed, so I must be effective. I deserve a promotion from assistant to full superintendent now, right?
Yeah.
You must have been eavesdropping earlier in the
I
day in my office. Yeah.
Right, and that's what it was. So I knew there was an issue, but then there was something aside from being a doctor, my solid education to give you my background prior to becoming an entrepreneur and founder was not only I was in academic medicine, so I also understand education from a STEM perspective. On the other
Mhm.
side of it, as at that time when you're in academic medicine, not only was I seeing patients, but I was a professor teaching medical students, residents, and also doing research. So I'm a
Wow.
researcher at heart. And after my own journey of burnout, I started to question this whole wearing your stress as a badge of honor or a sign of success. And then I started to notice this pattern as I was working with other educators and professionals in every sector, finance, tech, it's no different, hospitality, healthcare, that there's a problem here in the West. We wake up tired, so we caffeinate to get going. And
Mhm.
people tell me, oh, Romy, it was a venti latte, and I got pissed off because they used soy milk instead of oat milk through the drive through, and it ruined my whole day. But really, it's also probably 4 energy drinks that they're not talking about. And if once the caffeine fails, maybe you've gone to the doctor and you have prescription Adderall or Ritalin to get through the
Mhm.
day, or some type of ADHD medicine, and you're going through with the caffeine or Ritalin going, why can't I focus? And the to-do list is multiplying faster, Alex, right? Then you can handle it.
Yes.
How many browser windows are not only open on all of our screens right now, but in our brains? And
Right.
that's the sign. And you're like, okay, I'm hearing this podcast. Tonight is a self care night. I'm going to go home and do it. And you go and you can't shut off work. And so you're like, let me have a glass of wine or three or a bourbon. Or if you don't drink, some overpriced bougie supplement from some Instagram influencer, and you're like, I really am going to sleep tonight. And you put your head down on the pillow and you can't shut down your racing thoughts. That's the
Correct.
busy brain. In medical clinical terms, I say this is in neurology and psychiatry, Alex and Mark, the traditional community got it wrong that we can't treat ADHD and anxiety all day with caffeine and then at night give sedatives like alcohol or prescription sleeping pills. It's making the underlying inflammation in the brain even worse for a busy brain. And that this
Wow.
is a triad of symptoms is adult onset attention deficit disorder, ruminating anxiety, and insomnia. And we know now from research that's already been written and additional research I've been doing in the last 5 years in the workplace is that this is commonly seen in high achieving adults and who've been sold that same lie I was, wear stress as a badge of honor. Success doesn't happen without stress and sacrificing your brain and your body.
I'm a mom. And so, and I think women especially are like, no, I put myself last. No, 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 it's fine. No, women are supposed to multitask. So we wear that, I think, more so as a badge of honor. Like, this is what distinguishes us. I'm thinking, like, what are the impacts of this lie that we've been told, this multitasking lie?
Yeah. One, I think I'm going to unpack. You just said two things there I want to unpack really quickly. It's okay. You're asking me about gender differences in busy brain. When I look at the regular clinical literature, there really isn't there. So I really want to highlight that first. There are different contributing factors to your point, Alex, right?
Okay.
Here in the United States, if you're a gender assigned female at birth, you're more likely to be stuck with caregiving for young children or elderly relatives. So that will add to your to-do list naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But the inflammation pattern in the brain is identical in whether you're gender assigned female or male at birth. And I really want to highlight that because
Mm,
how often do you get to talk to a woman in STEM who understands brain science? And I want to make it clear
mm,
that there is a grave problem with the gender-based neuroscience that is out there. When men and women's brains are wired differently, women are more emotional at work. That is actually all nonsense. And I want to keep this podcast PG. Otherwise, I'd say a really harsh curse word in one of the four languages I know how to curse now in. That we look back and unpack it and see that this was written, this gender neuroscience was propagated by homophobic cisgender straight men.
Mm,
And yes,
interesting.
so when a diverse group of neuroscientists who identify as female and gay and straight and non-binary look back, that a lot of that literature is not true. So I
That's
really want to
fascinating.
unpack that and be careful because I hear this a lot. The second thing I do want to unpack though is when you look at mental health data, there are certain patterns like anxiety that women are more tend to have, but it doesn't mean men are immune.
Mm,
ADHD and ADD, adult onset, does tend to look a little differently in men than in women as well, right? So that's the nuance things I really want to unpack before I get to your second question. Does that make sense? We have to be really careful to
absolutely.
say men and women are more prone, right? And then you said, well, what
mm,
is the ramification of busy brain? I mean, aren't we seeing it now? Teachers
Yeah.
and administrators are quitting in droves, the
mm.
quiet quitting phenomenon. But I want to tell you, and we'll give you a link to my TED talk in this is um, I came out very early on at a time where burnout wasn't a part of the vernacular in the medical community, let alone the lay media or the public. And I kept going, stress is a badge of honor. I entered neurology at a time where less than 5% of brain doctors in America were women. I knew you got to shut up and you got to put up. Keep your head down, keep your heels high, and stay laser focused. Success at all costs, 120-hour work weeks, like
Mhm.
everyone listening to this podcast right now. It's not just doctors. And that busy brain and high stress lifestyle and being caffeinated all day and sedated at night, the inflammation in the brain, we have a busy brain center in the brain that is not just linked to how we think and our memory and our mood, but to the rest of our body, like an airport traffic control center.
Mm,
And so the airport traffic control center in Atlanta, Hartsfield Jackson Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, is not only handling flights in taking off in Atlanta, but all over the world. And that's the way the brain is it's wired to control our immune system, our digestion, our
mhm,
joints, hormones. And so that is what gets affected. We get a busy brain. And the first thing is we see in my research is a disturbance in sleep. And then there can be a disturbance in hormones, markers of inflammation, food, and how we continue to use technology and abuse technology. And that's where the shift or the brain shift protocol comes in. So, bottom line, you have a busy brain. It could affect any organ system. So when people heard me speak at Saney's, Mark, where you and I tried to meet up and it got too
yes,
busy,
yes,
right?
yes.
People were coming up to me. I had lines for hours afterwards. Dr. Romie, is my high blood pressure that happened in the pandemic related to busy brain? Yes. I've been dieting and I think my hormones are off. I'm gaining weight instead of losing weight. Yeah, that's because of a busy brain.
Wow.
Joint pain, worsening autoimmune disease, long COVID, all of that is from the stress induced busy brain and leading to that.
I know that educators aren't sleeping well because we're busy trying to meet the ever growing demands of meeting children's needs. which are greater than ever.
Anybody in any sector can say that in the pandemic and post-pandemic, I'm having to do more with less. And the expectations of the people we serve, whether it's patients or students in a classroom or your clients in a banking or tech institution, are expecting more. And the world's problems today seem amplified because of 24-hour news and social media.
Mm,
What I want to say is when we have a busy brain, we're on a continuum on the way to burnout. When I am burned, I remember my burnout. You tend to look at the entire system and be like, oh, it's me alone on this mountain against
mm,
the whole system. There's
mhm,
no hope for change. That's burnout, that lack of hope, right? The me against the system, the lack of ability to find worthiness in your job and hope and
mhm,
gratitude, right? And being disengaged.
right.
That's the burnout. I don't disagree that today, compared to 10 or even 20 years ago, teachers, administrators have more to do on their plate. That's why when I come into the school systems to work with the teachers or virtually or at conferences, I actually say stop using the term work life balance, life work balance, work life harmony, because that puts the psychological shame back on you, Mark and Alex, saying,
Mm,
Alex, you're doing something wrong as a mom. Mark, you're doing something wrong as an educator. You don't have work-life harmony and balance. The truth is how can you have balance when there's more on your expectation list in education, right? So when we talk about healing burnout and a collective busy brain, let's say in a
mhm,
company, so I'm going to say in your school system or in a
mhm,
company, there's three components that have to simultaneously be addressed. One is operational excellence. How can we improve operations? That's, to your point, everything that's on the plate. How can technology work for a teacher's benefit rather than create more pain, right? For example, instead of having to handwrite a note to 30 parents at once, you can send a email to 30 people at once, right? Like that's technology working in your behalf. Um, that's operational excellence is one side. Your well-being, mental and physical, is one third of the sector, and the other one is having a culture of belonging. That is the leader in the school, the superintendent, your immediate manager, and the overall CEO or principal and superintendent, creating a culture of belonging. And that isn't Romie saying as a chief wellness officer, this is me studying the organizational data. This is Stanford University's model of building a culture of wellness is belonging, taking care of individual well-being and healing, and operational excellence. So when a teacher is burned out, they're just focused on the operational lack
Mm,
of excellence, and they're not
right.
like, do I feel like I belong here?
mm,
Are we doing something in each of your schools to foster belonging between the new teachers and the senior teachers,
Mhm,
between the teachers who are STEM educators and the creative side, right? I mean, like, think of all the different ways of belonging. And on top of it, all the diversity, equity, inclusion piece in it, right? So
right.
that's a winning culture.
wow, that was fascinating.
There's a lot to think
There's
about
a
there.
lot, yeah, there's a lot to digest there. Exactly right.
But something resonated when I said belonging with both of you. You both sighed, you
Mhm.
both leaned in
Hmm.
into your video. I want to know what came up for both of you because teachers are listening and they're going to want to rewind that, going, wait, what did she just say about belonging? I can
Mhm.
speak to it larger from the corporate side than I can from being embedded in a school system. What does that mean to the both of you?
You know what's fascinating is I'm thinking about it as an educator that we strive for that in our classrooms. And that we know, any educator knows that if your students do not feel like they belong in your classroom, zero learning will take place. So it's just interesting, right? Is that like that giving part of educators is we're focused on them. But when you said it, I'm like, of course, it makes perfect sense that what I give to my students, we should also have in return. But when you said it, we were like, wait a second. We always think of it, am I correct, Mark? We think of it from the
Yes.
perspective as giving and ensuring that's happening on their behalf. So that was fascinating.
You know what you're saying, Alex, is for the students. I want to summarize, but what are you doing as a community of
Mm-hmm.
teachers for each other in the building, and the assistant teachers, and the environmental services, and the cafeteria support staff, and the administrative? Like, what are all of you doing for belonging?
Right.
We try to create in our classrooms a familial experience because, like Alex was saying, we know that the old adage, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, really plays out in the hearts and minds of young people, especially. And so when you're saying that, it's making me ask the question, what are the different steps that we take to try to create that same sense of family among the faculty? And I know that that's something, at least in the school where we work, that is something that gets a lot of attention. Maybe not as much as we would like because there's the logistics of running the day-to-day operations of the organization, which can absolutely suck all of the most, if not all of the time away from trying to do those other kinds of things. But I know that there is a conscious effort to try to address building those kind of familial bonds to the greatest extent that we can.
Could I give one advice from a mindful leadership point of view and mindfulness based cognitive therapy that I give often when I'm
Please.
giving lectures in corporate America to those that identify as female leaders? They'll call me in to do those workshops and say, how can we uplift each other? Because I think this could be used as the collective whole. Belonging is two parts. And when I have a busy brain, the first part of belonging that shuts off is my belief, Romie. Do I belong? Let's say I was a teacher in your school, Mark, and I have to have a sense of belonging. Like, I belong here as a teacher. I belong in this classroom. And then there is me giving to the other teachers and staff in the building. And a powerful way I teach this in corporate America is when I'm about to start a new activity, especially if I'm feeling stressed or a little nervous, take that moment, that 2 minute moment to have present centered awareness and breathe and find my feet and focus on my busy brain and acknowledge it's there. And then focus on my breathing and my heart and tell myself, Romie, I see you. I hear you. And Romie, I believe in you. And then when I'm walking through the corridor, every teacher I see literally open my heart. Because what happens? Our brains are working, and I may be in the corridor with you going, hey, Mark, what's up? How are you? Alex, how's your dog going? That's your brain. I want to do it from my heart. So even if I say hello, I'm literally looking at you and silently saying, I see you, I hear you, and I believe in you. And that creates a consciousness and a feeling of belonging.
It's much deeper.
Yes, I may not even know you. I may have forgotten your name because you're new to the team, but I still am acknowledging I am human.
Mm,
You are human. We both belong here.
that's powerful. That exercise, is that your inner voice that you're tapping into?
Yeah, it's a great way to say it. People call it your inner voice, your inner soul compass. Um, in traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, it's talking to the little girl or little boy in you.
Mm.
But really, as we become more emotionally intelligent and self aware as leaders and practice mindfulness, it's that ability, I say, to like put the nonsense that's happening in our busy brains in a file drawer and close it and open the drawer that's teaching me to be present with my brain and my heart at the same time as a conscious leader. And I have to start with myself because, Alex, I can give you all the pep talk you want as a woman, one woman leader to another. But if I'm not taking care of myself, it kind of doesn't come across authentic, does it? Right?
Right, right. It's lacking. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and an example I really want to give is name any week and there's something awful in the news cycle. And
Mhm.
you have to go in and tell children K through 12 everything's okay. And if you don't
Mm.
feel it's okay, you assuring them is going to feel very false. So we always have to find our sense of security, our sense of belonging first, and then give to others. It's the same concept.
And this was a massive concern when we were going through the pandemic and we
Yes.
were trying to meet with students and get them onto Zoom calls and Google Meets and just to check in on them. We haven't heard or seen from them in days or weeks and trying to tell them everything's okay when everything clearly is not okay. because they're experiencing tragedies in their families and loss of employment and moving and suffering that we can't even imagine.
It makes me think that this is such a powerful tool. Is that something that we should teach, or is this something that for some is more instinctive than others? The idea of connecting to that inner voice.
Alex, I did not learn this as a child. I wish I had. I wish somebody had taught me this in medical school. What I'm talking about is both mindfulness and emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, right? And I think the countries whose education systems are excelling way past the United States have this embedded in K through 12. You know that from the literature. Your teachers are nodding up and down, but it's also that we're being taught that as leaders. So we see now some of the top medical schools, MBA schools, law schools have been teaching mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And that course is as important to take and pass and do well in as your other, courses that are based on content towards your career. And so, I think it's a falsehood that this sense of calm and sense of stress management is just something Romie has that Alex doesn't have, or Marc has it better than Romie. That's ego talking. These are
Mm.
skills that you consciously say, I need to learn this. And when I got sick from my burnout and ended up in life-saving surgery, I was sitting in the hospital going, good Lord, I don't have any adulting skills to get me out of this. Nothing I learned in medical school is going to prepare me of what do I do now with my life and how do I move forward. And it was a conscious decision. I mean, of course, the universe, finds ways, and but then the mindfulness, but it was a conscious decision. I'm going to seek out these teachers. I'm going to practice this. I'm going to go through these courses.
Is this similar to grit? Is mindfulness and learning how to persevere through and work through busy brain and burnout a form of grit? Because I know grit has become, especially on college campuses, and that's what made me think about it because you mentioned college campuses before. I know on some campuses, especially in Ivy League schools, the grit courses or the grit labs are among the most popular and sought after courses. So is there an overlap at all here?
What I think is emotional intelligence and mindfulness are tools in the tool chest that are taught in these grit labs and the grit things. I will say I could be wrong because I haven't looked into it completely, but I feel I feel sometimes like an old Indian auntie. And in my world of neuropsychology, it was called learning resilience skills.
Mm.
And the cool kids now call it grit. It's kind of like I remember the time of being at school and putting in a quarter into the phone to call my mom to pick me up from yearbook and newspaper and speech and debate team. I was a journalism jockey in high school. And, now like you don't even need to text your parent. They can just find you on an app and know where you are and come get you if needed. Right. So, or you
Yeah.
call it Uber. Like that's what the grit lab is compared to emotional resilience, but probably the same thing.
I think this is like an amazing time for this conversation in education because there is a shift. We have social emotional learning that when I started my career, it wasn't a part of the curriculum. And now I think we see the need. And so it is integrating into curriculum across the board, STEM, creative, and I think it's just needed.
It's not in every school district equally, right?
Hmm.
Like, you're going to learn
No.
reading, writing, arithmetic, but it's not. And that's where we need to head. But again, we're getting to children, and I
Hmm.
love that you do that, but I'm modeling this for you both. This is the busy brain. Let me,
Right.
one is wear stress as a badge of honor, denial. Number two is deflect, denial, deflect. Let me deflect it to the children. No. This is about the
Come
adults
back.
that are here on the podcast and listening. This is about you and the other adults in the building, your busy brain. That's why you brought me here.
Well, it's about breaking habits that we may or may not even know exist in our practice. What can we do and what can our audience do right now to start curing those busy brains?
I was that out of box speaker talking about mindfulness and stress management and burnout in corporate America and educators before the pandemic. And now it was hot in demand and people calling us virtually. And I humbly learned really quickly, and nobody I mean, can you imagine if I had come on and be like, just eat berries and breathe and everything's going to be fine?
I was kinda hoping for that because 'cause it'd be easy and quick, and I would
It'd
just
be
be
easy and
cured.
quick, but it's not that, right?
That effective.
And again, the doctor researcher in me said something different is going on in the pandemic. I feel it with myself. I see it at Evolution Hospitality, where I'm chief wellness officer. We started to administer a neuropsychology stress test that's known as the busy brain test. And it is available for free on my website and on all my social media, and it tells you the level of stress, busy brain stress to burnout. And so, number one is self awareness and self assessment, because either you're like, Romie, I'm fine, I'm sleeping good, girl, or people are like, who isn't stressed out in this school building, you know? So, one is assess and know your numbers. So, that's number one, is to do that. Two, when we looked at our research, there were 5 key areas that were off, and it's different in everybody. So, this is kind of like a suit. The three of us have very different body types. So, one suit isn't going to fit the three of us, it would need tailoring. That's the same way. So, we know with most people it's your circadian rhythm or biological clock that gets off with the busy brain center in the brain and all the connections throughout the body. And 5 key areas are affected differently in everyone. The core one, sleep, and your awake sleep cycle, and your kind of your awake energy cycle. Number two is hormones. And hormones starting from the brain. People think hormones and they think testosterone in men, estrogen,
Mhm,
progesterone in women.
mhm,
That's the last effect. I'm looking at thyroid and adrenal glands primarily. Eye is markers of inflammation, particularly vitamin D3. It's like a super hormone that gets robbed when we have a busy brain. And then food and how we're using food to fuel ourselves. And we need it a little differently when we're in a busy brain and stress and burnout, and how we're handling technology. And so all those things come into the recipe. And that's the 8-week brain shift protocol that we deliver. We're actually running, while you and I are recording this podcast, we're
mhm.
running an 8-week program for educators right now and leaders, and putting them through micro habits of how do I change in cohort based learning as a group. We're going to go through this as a group. So, we're more likely to have these habits stick. And within 8 weeks, getting to the root cause of what's happening with your busy brain and starting to heal it.
It's fascinating.
Thank you. Isn't brain science cool?
It really is.
And I just
Incredible.
want to model this to you, Alex, as just a reminder, because everybody's classroom has a little Romie, a girl who has potential to go into the science, technology,
Mhm,
engineering, math, and medicine. I have to put a plug in right now because the STEM pipeline has been robbed in the United States in the pandemic, from kindergarten all the way through the C suite. Once a
mhm.
woman leaves undergrad, graduate school, her job, academia, it's not really easy in the world of STEM to re-enter. And so just, yeah, I'd say that is, remind the girls in your classrooms that their brains are wired for science and math.
I love that.
The 330 method. Can you describe that and discuss that and share that with us, please?
Yeah, because I know half the people listening are like, Romie, that whole protocol you talked about, way too complicated. I'm a busy teacher. Didn't you get the memo? I got it, right?
They have 3 new preps. They don't, they time is of the essence.
Time is it? And so I was like, okay, what could you do in 3 minutes a day and 30 minutes at night to get control of your busy brain? The 330 method, right? So 3 minutes during the day, up to 30 minutes. 3 minutes is, I talk about walk away from the scene of the crime. So if anybody watches all those crime shows on TV, by the way, stop that. That's so bad for your busy brain, right? It raises stress hormone levels. It really does, along with the news cycle. Watch videos of puppies instead, or kitty cats, right? Either one. But the idea is, in 3 minutes, step away from the scene of the crime, which is your desk, your work office. That is a trigger to your busy brain of my to-do list, too many browser windows open, anxious. So literally step away for 3 minutes and think, what are 3 things I can see? What are 3 things I can taste, touch, hear, smell, and reset your brain. And in schools, it's wonderful because we teach that mindfulness type break, and do it with your students, even at 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, no matter what's going on. You're running a physical education class, it's study hall, whatever it is, right? Step away from the scene of the crime, and, for 3 minutes. And for most people, it ends up being a little longer, right? So that's one, is just, and then when you're done with that, What are three things I can see? What are three things I can hear? What are three things I can smell, taste, and touch? Then say, what is one thing I need to focus on right now? And it's called a
Mm.
quick shift. So that, to your point early on, Alex, you talked about multitasking. We call it quick shift instead. Teachers are busy. You have to be able to quickly shift your focus from one thing to another. And sometimes you may feel like you're not finishing one thing. So we say, come back and focus on that one thing and just do it for 30 minutes and it'll get done.
In order to select that one thing, one has to pause, right?
And
Okay.
reset all the senses of the brain.
Reset, right.
Because the way you reset the busy brain center is what is the sensory input that's coming in? It's what you're seeing, touching,
Mm.
tasting, smelling. So if I'm seeing my computer and I see my to-do list and I can touch the pen on my to-do list, I can't calm down my busy brain and be present with this interview.
That's
So
fascinating.
that's 3
Thanks
minutes
so
during
much.
the day and then 30 minutes at night. Ooh, this is where it gets hard. If you heard me talk, I lose friends here, but I ask you to like divorce your digital devices, no matter how many emails or tests you need to grade, binge watching. You're like, oh, I need to let my mind rest. Let me just scroll and troll or whatever. Like
Mm.
all that has to stop. It's going to feel bad for the first few days. Your brain is literally going through dopamine withdrawal as if you were using crack cocaine
Wow.
and that touching of the screen, and then you go through it and keep yourself busy, and then you're going to get it all via email. If you take the busy brain test, you do a brain dump and kind of write down what's on your mind. And that's a great point that, through the brain shift protocol, we introduce a brain pause or mindfulness based exercises to just kind of calm the brain and the body down as you prepare for sleep.
Is that also 30 minutes?
30 minutes at night. So 3 minutes during the day, find one thing to focus on for the next 30 minutes. And then at night, 30 minutes of that detox. So that's the 3:30 method, part of what we teach in Brain Shift for the first part, the sleep, part.
And for people who are practicing 330, approximately how long does it take before you clinically start to see results and they start to feel a difference in their busy brain?
So, if you have difficulty falling asleep, typically within 7 days, and we give some supplement recommendations for people to get as well to calm some of that down. But honestly, just the brain dump and the disengaging from digital devices, typically clinical studies show within 7 to 10 days. Our study that we did back in 2017, which kind of launched all the research for the busy brain cure and the book and the manuscript that's being written now, for the brain shift protocol, showed 21 days. We put 450 liters through 21-day digital detox. And by the way, I want you to remember this is a hospitality management company. They manage hotels that are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So
Stress all day, all night.
stress all
Got it.
day. And there was this fear of, wait, you want me to turn off my phone? And I was like,
Right.
well, someone will call you if there's something emergent, but I need you to put the digital devices down and not email each other and text each other and all that. And we did the research and we found in 21 days, it was a phenomenal difference within the organization in 4 key areas. It reduced stress. The question of, I feel stressed more than 50% of the week. People were falling asleep easier. They were staying asleep. But here was the really surprising one. They were energized the next day. Didn't change coffee. We didn't change sleep. We didn't give supplements. It was just by doing that digital detox, brain dump, and introducing mindfulness for 21 days. And that was like the magic. And that's what started the research. That's what got me the job as chief wellness officer. One of the things, the transformation we see. And since that time, teams call us for that 21-day challenge and love it. But here's the reason it'll work. If you're like, ooh, Romie, sign me up and I'm going to go take the busy brain test, and you can download it all and share it with your staff. What do you all think was the key to success when companies did this and teams? What do you think?
Well, I think you have to have buy-in. People have to believe that there's going to be a benefit to their sacrifice or a benefit to their change in protocol or change in habits.
I think
That
that's
would be
one
my
of them,
thought.
Mark. I would agree buy-in, but we had a lot of contrarian people do it. What got people was the CEO, the president, anytime, and senior leadership was involved.
Oh,
So the person at the top of your food chain has to buy in has to drive it, has to tell people, we are going to do this and I'm leading the way. And I had a hard day today. This was hard. We found this not only in the digital detox programs we've been running for years, but even in brain shift. When the C-suite or the top leadership is on the line, or you see your immediate boss on the line, you're more likely to do it and show up. And then there's
Mm,
accountability. So what happens in companies, and whatever the way is in school, is if HR is driving it and they're saying there's a doctor and they send out an email and middle management shows up and senior leadership isn't there, then there's less likelihood of the program sticking. So it's the same way in school. A principal, an assistant, a superintendent, they need to model that this is important. I'm going to try it. Who's in it with me?
For those folks who are listening who are really just absolutely, you're blowing their minds right now, and they want to pursue more and get involved in brain shift, can you tell them how they can find you and how they can participate in this personal change?
I always think that self awareness starts with me first. So if it really resonated with you that I'm wearing stress as a badge of honor, or Romy who isn't stressed and burned out these days, especially in education, it's going to start with you first. Take the busy brain test. Like I said, we give it away for free on my social media or on my website. Everything at Dr. Romy will have the links here in the podcast. When we talk about brain shift, we talk about its whole person wellness for your brain, your body, and your team. Too often in education, we think of our students first, which is technically in the
mm,
corporate world, your client. Your team is the other teachers and administrators in the building and all the other support staff. You think about your team first, right? So, what am I doing today for my brain, my body, and then for my team? And that's what I want you to think about. And it may not be your whole school, but let's say it's the English department. What are you doing for your team? What am I doing for my brain? What am I doing for my body? What am I doing for my team? And then you get to your to-do list or operations. This
mm.
is the not the leader of the future, the leader of today that is succeeding and that is showing high engagement. And can I end with one story that really
Please.
impacted me?
Please.
I was invited as a keynote speaker for an ed tech company and known as HMH. I think you all know, and this is not an advertisement for them, but I was so moved by a principal in a small and rural county that is financially strained in Kentucky. And she started her job right like maybe 6 months before the pandemic.
Wow.
And all the teachers were already burned out. Many of you who are listening can relate to being in a school district that has limited financial resources. She had nobody quit during the pandemic. She was there caring for her teachers and the team and creating that and their well-being. And then the students, they then were like, what can we do to help operational excellence for all the children that are being left behind? And they adapted the technology. They got a student involved and the student was teaching the teachers how to use it.
Wow.
And it's an AI program, Amira, that helps children to read. So at the elementary school age level. And it was just profound. But I thought of her that she didn't realize in this terms, but she, by taking care of her brain and body during the pandemic, and then her team, which is all of her teachers, kept that integrity intact through a very awful and stressful time. And that's the key. And so I would say, number one, I want to ask you yourself, what are you doing for your brain, your body, your team, then your students, then your to-do list? And absolutely, you can call us to work. We have special rates for education. We put our money where our mouth is. We don't do discounted fees for anyone else. We send them to other speakers. But if it's an educational team or company calling, we will work with you to the best of our ability. We have virtual programs that I recommend for your senior leadership, your teachers. If you're having an education conference, reach out to us. We're here to do the best of our ability and provide that. And in January of 2024, I'll be reaching back out to you. The book is coming out
So
and the
exciting.
app simultaneously with it. And any of you that are PhDs know what it's like to do a dissertation and research. That's what I feel like this book is. So yeah.
I
Congratulations.
feel that. I feel that. That's for sure. That's wonderful. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Dr. Romy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and sharing your time. Alex, thank you for filling in for Nick and doing an outstanding job. And we're going to place Dr. Romy's links so you can find her, you can learn more about BrainShift, And everything that she discussed with us today on this podcast will have her website, her Instagram, her Twitter, her LinkedIn, all of her links, all of her socials, all of her information available on our website. Dr. Romie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all these wonderful ideas and strategies with us.
Thank you. It means the world. I am following my dreams, crushing glass ceilings, and I wouldn't have done it without any of my teachers and administrators that said, this is a girl that's going places and leaving this small town in Illinois. So thank you all for everything you do.